Welcome and thank you for joining us today for Network Management Megatrends 2022. My name is Raleigh Gould and I'll be the moderator for today's event. Our featured speaker is Seamus McGillicuddy, VP of Research covering Network Management at EMA. Seamus has more than 15 years of experience in the IT industry as an industry analyst and journalist. His research focuses on all aspects of managing enterprise networks. And before I hand things over to Seamus, I wanted today's audience to know that we will be concluding today's event by taking your questions. Feel free to log them anytime by using the Q&A functionality. And now I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to our featured speaker, Seamus McGillicuddy. Seamus?
Thanks, Raleigh, and thank you to everyone for joining me today. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank the sponsors of this research. This is an independent analyst research into network management, and it's made possible by financial support from these vendors: Ovic, Broadcom, IBM, NetScout, Park Place Technologies, Progress, and SolarWinds, all vendors who offer network monitoring and network management solutions for a variety of different types of enterprises, from the smallest to the largest. And so I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge them before we kick this off. So first, I'm going to talk about research goals and methodology. And this is the Network Management Megatrends research, which I think of as the definitive market research on the state of the art of network management in enterprises today. We've been doing this research project since 2008. It's a biennial study of how networking is done within an enterprise. What are you doing in terms of organizing your network team, giving them tools to build, manage, and troubleshoot the networks that make your business go. And as you can see, since it goes all the way back to 2008, sort of the early days of digital transformation of the world. But things have changed a lot in these 14 years. But you'll see in the report, and I'll reference it, some of the questions we ask of people in this research have not changed all that much going back to 2008, and it allows us to sort of benchmark how things have evolved in the world of networking today from 14 years ago. But we also like to track how new technologies and trends are impacting people. So this research, cumulatively speaking, going back to 2008, represents 14 years of data, thousands of IT organizations surveyed, if not tens of thousands, and scores of network operations professionals who have taken time to talk to me one-on-one about what's going on in their organization, including about a half dozen this year at Fortune 500 companies. The goals of the research, as I said, is we aim to track evolving network management strategies and tool requirements. How do you assemble a network operations team? Who does it work with? What tools they need? What requirements do they have of those tools? But we also explore how things are changing and how they're impacting their success. Based on my observations and interactions over the past few years, one thing I wanted to explore with this research was how hiring difficulties are impacting network operations. It's really hard to hire people in general. I can speak to this myself, but also, hiring people with technical skills can get really hard. And I think it's impacting network operations more over the last couple of years, in partly because of the pandemic, but lots of other factors as well. And then we also like to explore technical trends that are impacting networking. And I think this year is one of those years where there's a lot of disruption being driven by technical trends, such as multi and hybrid cloud network architecture, Internet of Things, and other things. Other things and trends that are worth exploring. And the report itself will explore a lot. This presentation explores some of the big ones. And then in terms of methodology for our 2022 iteration of the Megatrends study, we surveyed a little over 400 IT organizations. These are all people who have direct responsibility for the network in some way. They're either evaluating network technology and network management solutions, for implementing them in the organization or using them to manage and monitor the network. And some of them are also providing executive leadership of those types of people. This was a transatlantic study, so lots of Canadians and North Americans, and a minority of them from Europe, particularly the United Kingdom, France, and Germany, so the biggest economies in Europe, as well as one of the biggest economies in the world in the United States. And then a wide swath of company size. We had some SMPs and mid-market companies, and then a lot of enterprises and some very large enterprises. More than a dozen enterprise verticals represented. We did not include communication service providers or telecommunications or ISPs in this survey. We also excluded cloud providers. So we're really focused on the enterprises. We also had some government in there as well, and education. But the big ones here are manufacturing, finance and insurance, energy and utilities, and retail, also professional technical services not related to IT. We excluded IT companies just because we wanted to really focus on people who were focused on enterprise networks, not managing networks for other people or building networks for other companies, but the people who are operating their networks to support their business. In terms of job titles, lots of technical personnel. Most of them, as you can see here, majority of them, either engineers or architects in IT and or the network group, some executive level, CIO and CTO types, and then a good chunk of middle management as well, like managers, supervisors, and directors. There were some other like project managers that got in, some VPs here and there. In terms of functional groups, really a lot of network engineering and architecture representation. A good chunk from the IT executive suite, like those CIOs, some VPs, maybe some director level in there. 10% from the IT architecture group. And then 9% from DevOps. Got a lot of DevOps in here. About 4 or 5% from like a network operations center. We also saw some people from like vendor management, financial management in the IT organization, some project program management types, some data center operations. So a good variety of people. But the bottom line was all of them have a very strong focus on the network. It might not be the only thing they think about and work on, but it's a big component of their day. They know their networks inside and out. That was our goal of this research. We're seeing network operations teams really struggle today, and there's like a historic issue going, or there's a 6-year trend here that's troubling. Since 2016, I've been asking people that we survey, how successful do you feel that you are doing, like that your network operations team is? Like, how successful are they? You doing well? You doing bad? Could you be doing better? And the number of people who tell us we are doing great is decreasing at a troubling rate. You see, 2016, 2018, those guys were pretty numerous. Like almost half of enterprises in our surveys were saying we're successful. We don't feel like we could be doing better. And now something has shifted. 2020, that number dropped to 35%. This year, the survey that I did in March, that's when this data was collected, 27%. That is like, that's a trend that made me concerned. And it wasn't just the data. Anecdotally, I didn't talk to anyone who was giving themselves an A, maybe one person gave themselves a B. Here's a network team manager for a Fortune 100 pharmaceutical company who, has hundreds of people on his network operations team. Our network is one of the biggest in the world. We have hundreds of people maintaining it, and it's still a tremendous mess. Network engineer who's worked for 2 Fortune 500 financial companies over the last year or last decade. He's at one right now. NetOps is not super effective. I've seen big companies don't put enough investment into the people in their network operations center. He went on to say that they had lots of like tier 1 admins in their NOC, and not enough engineers, and too many things were being escalated to those few engineers that have the most skills. There's not enough capability in the first and second tier of their NOC. And that's because the company isn't investing in those people and training them properly. That was my takeaway from that conversation. And then a Fortune 100 consumer goods manufacturer, a network engineer there, told me if he was going to measure his success against the critical incidents, that, you know, the network is down and we got to get back up, we're doing okay. But if we're going to measure it against low impact incidents, I'd say no. He told me that at any given time, his global network has 1,000 tickets open. That they're not getting to because they're not destroying the business. They're only hurting the business. Why are they falling behind? On the left-hand side, top network operations challenges. There are two things at the top of this list of the top 5. I think they had like 8 or 9 options in this multiple choice question, but the two top are network data quality and conflicts. So they're pulling data from their networks through their monitoring tools or maybe manually through like CLI, and the data quality is not good, or there's conflicts in data. That's a tooling issue and a process issue. We'll look at that a little bit in a few slides. And then the shortage of skilled personnel. We can't find people to do the job. Rounding out the top 5 are some other things that are troubling. You know, we don't have policies for using the network, or we can't enforce those policies. Not a good thing. Ineffective infrastructure implementation. So maybe they bought an SD-WAN solution, rolled it out, and now the network's a mess, or, you know, they've got visibility issues around the underlay or whatever. I've seen that in other research I've done. Yeah, so project went bad, and now network operations needs to keep things going, even though the whole network is a broken mess. And then lack of cross-domain cooperation and decision making. You know, we've seen a tremendous increase in the amount of collaboration that goes on between the networking team and the security team. And I did research just on that topic last year that looked at that. I also think I think there's also problems. I've been aware of problems in other areas where cross-domain cooperation needs to take place. And one of them is the DevOps team. And we'll talk about that in a minute. I was having an interaction on Twitter yesterday and today with a network engineer from Google who was telling me, well, if the NetOps team, the DevOps team are not a single entity, then they're not really doing DevOps. And my response to him was like, tell that to the other 68% of companies that still have NetOps and DevOps siloed, and tell me they got a DevOps team. It's a mess. 31% of all IT service problems are reported by end users before network operations can detect them. What does that mean? Well, hey, only 31%. That means 69%. Am I doing my math right? Yeah, 69% are detected proactively. That's great. Well, that's good. But the other 31% are already causing trouble for your business. Your users called and complained. That means they're not getting their job done. So you're against the clock and you're fighting fires, and you got to drop everything to fix this, probably. Not always, but a lot of the time. And what does that do to the rest of your job? Like, aren't you supposed to be contributing strategic value to the business? Not if this is going on. Network management tool trouble. This is not good. Only 30, this is a mean response to this question where I asked them, what percentage of the alerts coming out of your network management tools are actionable? 34%. I asked that question 2 years ago and it was like low 40s. Now it's 34%. So it's going down. It's getting worse. That means like most of the alerts coming out of your tool don't mean anything. Like, they don't need to be dealt with, but you're still getting them, and you have to sort through them, and you got inexperienced people that think they got to fight a fire. It's not good. I asked people, are you satisfied with the ability of your management tools, your network management tools, to isolate problems? 30% said yes, they're fully satisfied. So no one's very happy. Well, most people aren't happy. Similar question, are you satisfied with your tool's ability to support root cause analysis processes when you're troubleshooting something? Only 28% said yes. We see no problems there. So tools are a mess. And why? Well, look at this. A typical network operations team has anywhere from 4 to 15 management tools. Um, this has increased. 2 years ago, I would say that the center of gravity on this bell curve was on 4 to 10 tools. Now it's stretched to 15. So we're seeing creeping expansion of the number of tools that people use. Here's this heroic 3.7% that have more than 25 tools. I've talked to people that have 75. Why? Because even in some enterprises, especially big ones, there are multiple teams managing and responsible for the network, and they have different tool sets sometimes. I remember talking to a network engineer. He was like he worked in network engineering and architecture. He was responsible for building the networks, but he also had things escalated to him from the NOC. And the NOC in his group, they had separate tool sets. He's the one that told me he had 75 tools, and that's one of the reasons why. Um, this research, I also asked, like, hey, what percentage of the problems on your network are caused by manual errors? And the response was like 27%, but is higher among the people with the most tools for managing their networks. It was a very, I didn't have room for to share that chart, but what you see is the fewer tools you have, the fewer manual problems, manually derived network problems cropping up. The more tools you have for managing network, the more problems are caused by manual errors. Direct correlation. And is one of the reasons why EMA for years has been saying consolidate your tools. One of the reasons why there's so many tools is because you talk to people on network operations like, well, yeah, I got like this big vendor, probably one of the vendors in who sponsored this research, doing all these things. But then, yeah, I have like 5 open source tools. And I also like to just, sometimes I just like getting data from, going directly to a switch and pulling, doing show commands and SCLI, getting data there. And then I got to put that into something, and then I got to make notes, and then I got to, it's not good. The prevalence of open source tools is high. Sometimes I've talked to people who have 2 SNMP monitoring tools, like, oh yeah, we have one tool that pulls SNMP, but then we have this other one that pulls SNMP just in case the other one's not doing it well. I'm like, well, why do you have that first one? This network engineer with a Fortune 100 consumer goods manufacturer that I've already quoted here, he says, we'd like to have as few tools as possible. If one tool could do all the jobs that our current 12 tool portfolio does, it would be easier in terms of integration and maintenance, but no one tool can do everything we need. And that's true. I don't think anyone can do everything they need to do with one tool, but maybe you could do it with 3 or 4. I don't think anyone can justify having 20. But sometimes I talk to people who are like, yes, we're transforming our tool set, but there's like 2 or 3 groups in IT operations that refuses to let go of some of their legacy tools. And so they continue using them. And so one group's using a nice, beautiful integrated suite and sharing data with everyone. But then when we have to work with that group, they're using something that's a mess and it's open source and it's really expensive and it's not good. You see some recognition among people that, yeah, they need to do a better job when they're procuring tools. You see tool procurement priorities, 26% say we are always looking for unified multi-function platforms. 23% insist they're going to just always buy the standalone best-of-breed tool to do the job. And then you see a lot of people interested in multi-tool suites from a single vendor. They vary in how integrated they want those tools, and a lot of suite vendors have varied integration. Like some vendors have suites of tools where everything is very well integrated, and others you might hear complaints that this tool's great, this tool's great, there's a lot of integration here, but then this third tool they have is not well integrated. Why? Because they bought it from someone else and it's still a work in progress. So yeah, and then 19%, they do best of breed standalone vendors, but they try to integrate them. And that can work sometimes, not always, and not, I mean, I mean, one takeaway here is there's a lot of different opinions on what's the best way to put together a network operations tool set, and it's leading to the numbers on that chart on the left. Let's turn to networking brain drain. Some of you may find that image disturbing. I'm sorry. Pass it on to my graphic artist, graphic designer. I'm sorry. Only 13% of the IT organizations in this survey told us that they felt it was very easy to hire networking personnel. That pie chart on the left details that you see, like, what is it? 37% said it's somewhat easy, which means it could be better. It could be easier. Is it ever easy to hire anyone? I don't know. I'm trying to hire someone right now. It's not going so great. But yeah, only 13% are like, yeah, this is just such a wonderful process to hire and retain networking people. I think that's a problem. And here's a network security architect at a large American bank who told me, he's had problems hiring people for positions in his company. And it seems like there's not a lot of talented people applying for jobs right now. And I would agree with him. Uh, from my experience. From his experience, he thinks turbulent times is an issue, like when there's like a pandemic, a war in Ukraine is another one, I guess. People sit tight. They're like, I'm not going to make a big change when I don't know what the future holds. I think that's an issue, and you see that when we ask, what are your big challenges of hiring people? The second one there, 40% said COVID-related issues, like travel restrictions, things like that. The biggest one is just the lack of specialized skills in the talent pool. Although I've talked to multiple people for this research who told me they're not hiring for specialized skills; they're hiring for smart people. And they, if those people are problem solvers with like a minimum amount of technical expertise, they can train them up on whatever it is they want them to do. But they're still having problems doing that. Benefits expectations is another one that's causing trouble. You see a lot of secondary issues here, like 40%, 40%, 40%, 40%. Because yes, it doesn't add up to 100 because I let them pick their top 3 problems. Benefits expectations. So I think part of that is cost of healthcare going up. I mean, that's not specific to IT, but then also flexibility. Like, millions of people are working from home during the pandemic. IT people had to do that too, but IT also has to touch some stuff occasionally, and that means they have to go into an office to like rack a switch or a router, and maybe they don't want to do that. Like I gotta, I live with my grandmother or something. I don't want her getting COVID. So yeah, that's an issue. And then you got CIOs causing trouble, like leadership pushing for lean staff. I heard that from a couple of my conversations this year and last year. Like, yeah, we see a lot of attrition, they tell me. During the pandemic, especially, like when jobs opened up because people left or whatever, we didn't fill those jobs. They just said, just, get it done. Get it done on your, I know you had 8 people and now you have 5, but you can still keep the network up and running, right? Okay. And then talent is inexperienced. Hiring process takes too long. I agree with those two, in my personal experience. Salary expectations is one of the least problematic issues because everyone knows that you want to get a network engineer with a lot of skills, you're going to pay 6 figures. What skills are they struggling to find? Network security, network automation, the big ones. In network automation, maybe you're looking for people who are newly established Python ninjas who can write all kinds of scripts or maybe even write software. A lot of people do homegrown network automation software. They take, maybe they're taking like some open source stuff, but then they do a lot of code around it to make it more enterprise grade. Lots. 9 out of 10 companies I've surveyed have at least some homegrown network automation software. 10 out of 10 have commercial network automation software. The typical company has like 2 or 3 tools just that they describe as network automation, let alone the monitoring and troubleshooting tools they have. So finding people that can work with all that stuff is hard. Then, secondarily, There's a dearth of monitoring and troubleshooting skills. And then public cloud networking. I'm going to talk a little bit about cloud in a second. I asked these guys, you think if you had like a nice commercial network automation tool could mitigate the issue? 79% said at least somewhat, yeah. And could you mitigate this issue of talent shortage with a modernized network performance management platform? 78% at least to some degree. So those are options. Now let's get into NetOps and the cloud. Cloud is the strategic driver of NetOps now. You see here, every 2 years, I ask, what are the technical initiatives that are driving your current priorities around network management and monitoring? Like your strategy around network management and monitoring. What's driving you in your decision making? Since 2008, the number one response to that question was server virtualization. Every year, that was at the top of the list without fail. What does that tell you? Workload consolidation, maybe workload mobility, created a lot of angst. You know, this huge shift from north-south to east-west, traffic patterns. I got to get a handle on that. I need to optimize the network for that, but I also need to get visibility into the east-west patterns of traffic. Very data center-centric issue. And then number 2 in 2020 was the Internet of Things. It hasn't gone away, I would say, but it was top of mind in 2020. And then number 3 was public cloud. Now 2022, you see, boom, public cloud's number 1 for the first time ever. Cloud native application architectures, you know, that can be in the cloud or the data center, obviously, or both, obviously. That's an issue for the majority of them. And then SaaS applications exploding. So it's all cloudy. It's all cloud stuff. Server virtualization now at the bottom of the list, like, you know, maybe like number 13 or 14. Yeah, it was number 13. And the Internet of Things, maybe like number 12 or 11. So those got blasted out of the minds of these NetOps guys. They're like, geez, the cloud is killing us. It's like disrupting everything. This is what we're focused on now. Forget figure out how traffic patterns in the data center are changing. I got to figure out how to get my hands around the cloud. And the problem is they don't have a lot of control in a lot of cases. And also complexity is exploding. So we asked, like, how many cloud providers are you using today? And what do you see for the future, like 2 years down the line? And all right, so 3/4 of them are multi-cloud today. It's going to be 9 out of 10 in 2024. Nearly half of all the enterprises in this survey are expecting to have 3 or more infrastructure as a service providers. That's a lot of complexity, especially because the networking technology, network primitives, the network features, all those different providers are going to be highly proprietary. The data that they generate, that your monitoring tools are going to collect and crunch, it's going to be proprietary. You may have a monitoring vendor that says, we got AWS figured out, and we're pretty good at Azure. Trying to figure out Google. And you got a fourth one? Who is it? Because we don't know who that fourth one might be. Maybe we'll get to it in 2025. Network engineer, Fortune 100 consumer goods manufacturer says, people always blame the network. If the problem has something to do with the cloud application itself, we're not good at getting that data. We're not good at getting that data. Tools need better visibility in the cloud. And the problem is, most people are going to agree with him because 91% of the network teams in this survey said we are using network management tools to monitor public cloud infrastructure. And only 18% of them believe that their tools are fully effective at doing that. That's not good. So what are they doing? They're retooling. 38% of the people in the survey said, we've identified cloud provider flow logs as an essential source of monitoring data. Now they're going to be pulling that from as many of the 3 or 4 or more cloud providers they're going to be using in 2024. So that's going to be really complex. And your vendor, you're going to have to stay on top of your vendors about that. Nearly half of them are using active synthetic monitoring tools. There's a lot of standalone vendors that do that, although many of them are getting acquired now. A lot of your strategic network management vendors have probably added that capability in recent years. There's a lot of different approaches to it. We asked them, why are you using this? The top use cases were public cloud visibility and SaaS, or unified communications as a service visibility. And the most successful network operations teams told me they were also focused on getting visibility into the hybrid WAN underlay, meaning the SD-WAN solution you built to create a hybrid network of internet and MPLS so that you could have connectivity from your user to your corporate office to your data center and up into the cloud. They're adopting active monitoring to get into that aspect of operations as well. And it's a very good idea for you to not only understand what's happening in the cloud and what's happening with your SaaS providers, but what's happening with the underlay that you use to get there. We saw that good visibility into the cloud through network monitoring tools correlated with a strategic focus in network operations teams on investing in network performance management tools, like either upgrading or buying new tools. The network operations team having a strong focus on working with DevOps, a strategic focus on application performance optimization, an interest in using AI ops to get insights from your data, and as the aforementioned, active monitoring as a tool investment. So those are the things that you could possibly do to get a better handle on cloud operations as a NetOps pro. Think about buying new tools, getting together with your DevOps team, getting them to listen to you, which is also hard. Optimizing applications, looking at AI ops for insights, getting active monitoring tools. Active monitoring tools, I think, are underappreciated in the market today. Position yourself for net DevOps. What is that? Oh, geez, another net ops, DevOps, NetSecOps, whatever. Just work with the DevOps team. Solve cloud disruption with a partnership with DevOps. 60% of the organizations in this survey said they have a DevOps team today, something they call a DevOps team. I defined it for them before I asked them the question, just in case you're wondering. I defined it according to prevailing definitions of DevOps, and they still said 60% of them said, we have a DevOps team. 33% said, we will have one in a couple years at most. Among those that have one or are planning to have one, I said, what is the relationship that you're expecting to have between NetOps and DevOps? And 38% of them said, there's no distinction. They're going to be one team, integrated. 55% almost said, we're going to build a close relationship with them, formalize collaboration, processes, tool integration, maybe have them report up into the same director. Let's get these guys on the same page. And then just 6.5% said, we're going to keep it loose. They're going to talk on the fly. I don't think they really need to talk that much. And then, only 0.3% said not really seeing any interaction between them. That tells you if less than 0.5% of these guys say that the NetOps team, the DevOps team really don't need to talk at all, that tells you they should be talking, right? Like everyone's doing it, at least to some degree. Some of them are doing it terribly, but most of them are trying. Where they need to work together, they told us, well, we really want them to get together on security policy design and implementation. And I'll tell you, I talked to someone 3 years ago that was struggling with that. And, it was already an issue 3 years ago. It was a network architect at a Fortune 100 retailer, I could describe it as. And he said that they decided to move their e-commerce application to AWS. I think I used it by paper once. I don't know. Anyway, the network architecture team was brought in to talk with DevOps because DevOps owned the cloud and network architecture owned the data center, or at least their portion of the data center. And they didn't really work together. And the DevOps team said, hey, can you just help us with security and compliance planning here? And the network architecture team said, sure, this is what you got to do for PCI compliance, because as you know, you're going to be using credit cards to conduct business. So you probably should think about that. And this is how you do it. Do this, 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 this. Here's a list of other things that you need to do and test. And DevOps like, great, thank you. And then the CIO said, okay, network engineering, network architecture, let's do SD-WAN in our stores. Get that done. So the global network architect went and he did a great job building an SD-WAN solution, hopefully. I didn't get to talk to him about that. And then the DevOps team said, hey, man, hey, we're having a PCI issue. Could you come take a look? So he comes back and looks at what's going on in AWS, and he's like, you did not do anything that I suggested. You ignored every single suggestion I did. You need to do this, this, and this. And the DevOps team's like, well, we can't fix that. So they scrapped that whole project. They started over from scratch. So anyway, security policy design, implementation, very important. Application optimization, fast fail iteration. Really nice to have a networking guy there to tell you how to do that properly. Network capacity planning. The networking team needs to know what DevOps is doing. They need visibility into what the future is. Application planning and design. I've talked to people who have used their network monitoring tools to solve application design issues from a DevOps team. One guy told me, yeah, I was having this real big issue with application performance in the data center. And it turns out the DevOps team was caching all of our directory information every morning. And it brought down this whole rack of servers. Yeah, so they fixed that. Operational monitoring also, the DevOps guys really want that. I'll tell you, people who are from a DevOps team in the survey, they selected the heck out of that one. Operational monitoring. They want visibility, and they think the NetOps team might have some tools that can help. So why aren't these guys working together? Cross-team skills gaps is number one, and I had one guy specifically tell me that IT leadership perceived the IT leadership above him perceived a skills gap issue that told him, as the CIO, that it probably wouldn't work to have NetOps and DevOps talk and work together, so they didn't bother. Lack of integrated tools, big issue. Budget limits, it's going to take money to get this to work. Lack of best practices to follow. And then divided leadership. A lot of DevOps teams do not report to a CIO or equivalent. They were like spun up from the ether by a line of business team. Like, let's go to the cloud and stop depending on IT to provision resources for us in the data center. And then as things mature, those groups have to start working together. But the reporting framework for the corporate organization is not conducive to getting people to play nice together. So, more tips for improving network operations. These are some of the best practices that the Megatrends research saw or uncovered based on statistically significant correlations between how people reported their overall success and how they responded to other questions. So, establish cloud visibility for end-to-end operations. People who had effective visibility in the cloud told us they were more likely to tell us that they're doing great with network operations in general. Also, they are more likely to organize network operations into a cross-domain operations center rather than a traditional standalone NOC. So bringing NetOps together with security, DevOps, all kinds of different groups, service management, just get them all together, get them working together, give them some tools they can collaborate on. Speaking of tools, consolidate tools, the unified multifunction platforms. The people that have that procurement priority are doing the best with NetOps today. Optimize tool sets for workloads around problem isolation, root cause analysis. People who are satisfied with their tool's ability to do that are more likely to feel successful in network operations. Maybe it seems self-evident to you when I'm saying it, but people are not doing it. Think about what the processes will be on the tools when you're evaluating them. You're evaluating a tool, monitoring tool, right? And you're like, this gets great data. I'm able to pull all the data in. What are the people going to do with that data? Does that tool give you an obvious, intuitive um, uh, set of reports and dashboards and drill downs that where you would think to yourself, I know how this could help me troubleshoot this issue that we have like every 2 months. Embrace SaaS and cloud-based management tools. People who are getting away from on-prem deployments of their network management tools are doing the best. Make network management tools relevant and usable to a wide variety of personas. Those guys are doing great. People who are like, this tool needs to just be accessed by our tier 3 engineers. Don't take that approach, because then you're limiting what the tier 1 admins can do. Think to yourself, how could a tool that I buy and implement allow my least skilled people to do things that usually only my tier 3 engineers can do? And how could it provide good data and reports and stuff to SecOps and DevOps and the CIO, so I'm not spending hours generating custom reports? Because a lot of people spend hours generating custom reports. I've talked to some who waste like thousands of man hours a year just generating reports. Require and use the following tool features: topology and inventory reporting across your infrastructure, compliance scorecards and reports, response time metric analysis. The most successful NetOps teams prioritize those features and functionality when they're selecting tools. Integrate network management tools with IT service management. That sounds like a no-brainer. ServiceNow, whatever. And cloud-native application management. Those guys that are like, I want to integrate my network monitoring tool with Kubernetes or whatever, they're doing better than the average enterprise at NetOps. Adapt network management tools for IoT device discovery and management. Those guys are doing better. People who are looking at 5G solutions, private 5G, as a sort of a supplement to their wireless LAN overall, as a way to support high density device connectivity for like critical communications and IoT, and also to overcome the interference issues that you might be having with Wi-Fi. Those guys are doing better. It's kind of an early technology, but it's out there. And then explore streaming network telemetry as a potential replacement or supplement to simple network management protocol, instead of relying on poll-based tools to poll SNMP and get all these metrics from your devices. Subscribe to streaming flows of data coming out of those devices. Closing thoughts. So this little guy's running really fast. He's falling behind. NetOps is falling behind. Tool sprawl, obviously an issue. Skilled engineers, hard to find. The cloud is making a mess. And one way to deal with that is to get together with the DevOps team and make it work. The report on Network Management Megatrends is 70 plus pages. There's also some insight into how IoT is affecting people, how people are looking at 5G, private 5G, what they're looking at when struggling with the concept of streaming network telemetry, if you're interested in that. The shift towards SaaS-based network management is explored deeply, and then prevailing network management tool requirements overall, organizational strategies, and more benchmarks of success, best practices are in there. So I recommend you download the report if you're interested. There's the cover, there's a link, and now I'm going to turn it over to Raleigh for Q&A.
Great. Thank you, Seamus. I will be sending a follow-up email that will include resources from today's event, including more information on this new report. Seamus, jumping into the questions, the first one is, why are network management tool sets so large? I use only 2 or 3.
Yes. Okay. So I think I went into this to some extent. Open source tools are free. So sometimes you buy a tool and you're like, it's not really good at this one thing. I'm going to download this open source tool. And so every time I need to do this one thing, I'm going to use this. And then that guy convinces his buddies or her buddies that they should use it too. And then that tool has inertia. And then the process repeats and it repeats. And the tool that was purchased that did all these things, but maybe not one thing well, it gets old. And then the company says, you know what, we gotta modernize our commercial tool set. So let's rip this out and put in this, and this thing does everything great. And it does a lot of things great, but all those open source tools are still there. These people who implemented the open source tools, they've gone from having dark hair to gray hair, and they're not changing. And then you also might find that you've implemented a new tool that can do lots of stuff, but you only have time to implement maybe 10, 20, 30% of the capabilities before you got to move on to something else, like implementing SD-WAN or facilitating a migration of applications to the cloud. And so even though the tool is capable of doing like 10, 15 things great, it's only implemented to the point where it can do 3 things great. And then the 4th thing is suddenly needed. You're like, oh my God, I need to do this 4th thing, but I don't think I have something that does it. You do, but it hasn't been implemented in the tool that you bought 3 or 4 years ago. So then the CIO is like, well, we need something that does this tool. So they go and they buy the best tool that does that job. And now you have that sitting next to the tool that does do the job, but isn't able to because you didn't spend the time to do it, to implement it. Okay, that's my scenarios.
Good insights, Seamus. You had mentioned hiring and how difficult it is right now. What's your advice for hiring network talent?
Okay, so I heard from multiple people that I think I mentioned this offhand, but don't look for the certifications. Don't look for the person that did exactly what you're looking to do. Like, oh, this guy, this woman, she's certified in AWS, Azure, Google Cloud Platform. I think she can help me build a multi-cloud network. Because she's certified in all those things, but also she knows all those, like she knows all that. Plus, oh well, she's a Juniper network engineer, and we're a Juniper shop, so we're good. We're all set. You're not going to find that unicorn a lot, right? So what the people I talked to said is just look for smart people who are curious, they have good personalities, they want to learn, and they've shown technical capability in the past to solve problems, but not always necessarily all the problems that you have. And you can train them up. And that means that you need to spend the time to train them. You need to invest in them. You can't just hire them and say, all right, fix this, do that. You have to say, okay, you're smart. We hired you because you're smart. I know you don't know how to do all of this. So now we're going to send you to a class to get certified on this. You're going to have this mentor work with you so he can show you how things work here. And make them feel like they're valued and that you're investing in them. That's what I would say.
Thank you, Seamus. Let's take one final question. It is, why are so many people struggling to get good cloud visibility?
Okay, so I think I probably talked a little bit about this too, but so 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I was asking every network monitoring vendor, what are you doing in the cloud? And I'd say like 40% of them had an answer. The other 60% said, well, not really, our customers aren't really asking us to monitor the cloud, we're monitoring networks. And that's what we do. So then, 2 years later, 70% of them had an answer. And that, the answers to that question varied in quality. But at least they were answering the question. At least they had an idea of what they're going to do. So I think a lot of network management and monitoring vendors got a late start on this because they're waiting for a critical mass of customers to ask for it. And it put them on their back feet. And one of the issues with that was they didn't just have to solve AWS. They had to solve Azure, and they had to solve Google Cloud, maybe Oracle, maybe IBM. little guys that you don't know, Alibaba, if they're got a footprint in East Asia, and you talk to monitoring vendors, and they got AWS figured out like 4 years ago. They got Azure figured out like 2 years ago, and they're almost figuring out Google. But even when they got it figured out, there's still gaps, because let's talk. You don't own that infrastructure in the cloud, and you're never gonna have administrative control over the physical infrastructure of the network in those cloud data centers. And that means you just need to think about monitoring cloud in a different way. Like, okay, these flow logs that all these vendors are producing are pretty useful. A lot of them are allowing you to tap traffic, and you need to figure out how to do that effectively. And then there's like active monitoring that you could do. And I think like everyone's doing like maybe one of those things or two. They're not doing all of them. And you got to accept the fact that the center of your universe is no longer the data center. If it is, it won't be for long. I talked to a Fortune 100 company a couple months ago who said they had 4 global data centers and all 4 of them were going away. That didn't mean they're going 100% cloud. What it meant was we're going to reduce our overall private data center capacity by 90%, and it's going to live in 6 or 7 colo facilities across the world. And its sole purpose is going to be to provide resources to our cloud, our public cloud, which is going to mean a hybrid multi-cloud architecture. Now, if a Fortune 100 company that has a gigantic network with extremely painful complexity is doing that, you gotta bet that a lot of more agile companies are going to do it too. So the days of the center of your universe being the data center are numbered, which means you need to commit to a tool set that works for the cloud, and it may not be the tool set that you have now. A lot of your tool vendors may have answers to questions, and maybe they'll solve a lot of the problems you have, and may even take you all the way on a journey to a cloud-first world, but you need to at least accept that fact first. And I don't think a lot of network operations teams have. They're still living in an on-prem world to some extent. And their tool vendors might be encouraging it, but they need to accept the fact that the cloud is fundamentally different from the data center that they've always had a pretty good handle on. And they need to rethink their overall tool process and people strategy.
Great insights, Seamus, and there is a lot more of that in this new research report. I do hope you'll check it out. I wanted to thank the audience for joining us again, and I hope we'll see you at a future EMA research webinar. Thanks again for joining, and enjoy the rest of your day.